An immigrant janitor donated his savings to charity, unaware it fulfilled an ancient prophecy. The words danced across the local newspaper's back page like forgotten stars in a night sky most people never bothered to look up at. Elena Cortez folded the paper carefully, wondering about the man behind this small headline. A headline that would have disappeared entirely if not for her fascination with ordinary heroes. 63-year-old Miguel Alvarez scrubbed at the stubborn coffee stain on the marble floor of Westbrook Financial Tower, his weathered hands red and raw despite the thin rubber gloves. 22 years in America, and still the cold seeped into his bones differently here. Sharper, more insistent than the mountain chill of his homeland. Above him, financial advisors in tailored suits walked past without a glance, their shoes occasionally scuffing his freshly mopped sections. Miguel didn't mind. The invisibility had become a comfortable cloak over the decades. Mr. Alvarez. The cheerful voice of Diane, the night receptionist, broke through his methodical rhythm. "Don't forget your mail." He looked up, his knees cracking in protest as he straightened. His smile, the one that still carried the warmth of San Salvador's sun, transformed his tired face. "Gracias, Diane." She handed him 3 envelopes, their edges already softened from being carried in her desk all day. Unlike the others, Diane saw him, really saw him. In a building of 1,000 employees, that meant something. Later, as Miguel settled into his apartment, a 1-bedroom walk-up with walls thin enough to share his neighbors' arguments and celebrations alike, he opened the envelopes with careful fingers. Bills, as expected. And the third, his monthly statement from the bank. The balance stared back at him. $18,742.16. Nearly $19,000. Almost 2 decades of saving, of sending most money home until there was no one left to send it to, of eating meals that cost less than what the executives upstairs spent on coffee, of mending and patching and making do. Miguel's eyes drifted to the small shelf above his television, where a framed photograph stood like a tiny altar. A young woman with his same eyes smiled back, Lucia, his daughter, forever 23. The cancer had been quick and merciless 5 years ago, leaving Miguel truly alone in this foreign land. "What good is saving now, mi vida?" he whispered to her image. Their dream had been for her education, for opportunities Miguel never had. Without her, the money sat uselessly in an account, accumulating dust and regrets. The decision came not in a flash of inspiration, but in the quiet acceptance that some burdens were meant to be released. The next morning, Miguel walked into the local branch of his bank, his work uniform exchanged for his one good button-down shirt, the collar frayed but ironed meticulously. "I would like to close my account," he told the young banker whose name tag read Jason, "and make a donation." Jason's fingers paused over his keyboard. "A donation, sir?" "Si. To the children's hospital, the one that helped my daughter." Jason's professional demeanor softened slightly. "That would be Mercy Children's. You want to donate the entire balance?" Miguel nodded once, his calloused hand resting protectively over the bank statement in his pocket. "They could not save my Lucia, but maybe they will save someone else's child." The transaction took less than 15 minutes. Miguel walked out feeling lighter than he had in years, as if the money had been a physical weight around his neck all this time. He had kept only enough for next month's rent. What Miguel couldn't know, what no one in that bank could have possibly known, was that 700 miles away, in a small climate-controlled room at the University of Chicago, Professor Elena Cortez had just translated the final passage of the Codex Vaticinium, an obscure pre-Columbian text that had consumed the last 8 years of her academic career. When the traveler who has lost his home gives freely his last treasure to heal the children of strangers, the cycle of sorrow will be broken. She read aloud to her empty office, her voice trembling with the weight of the words. The guardian will return. The prophecy was specific. Oddly, impossibly specific for a text created centuries before modern hospitals or charitable donations. Elena had dismissed it as metaphorical, as scholars always did when ancient texts became too precisely relevant. Yet something about it haunted her, enough that she collected stories of charitable giving, especially from immigrants. Which is how Miguel's small act, mentioned in a 3-paragraph human interest story, had found its way into her hands. 3 days after his donation, Miguel's routine remained unchanged. The floors still needed mopping, the trash bins still needed emptying, and the executives still needed someone invisible to do both. He was on the 32nd floor, working late to cover Fernando's shift, when he first noticed the girl. She couldn't have been more than 12, with dark hair pulled back in a neat braid and a blue school uniform that seemed oddly formal for a child in an office building after 9 p.m. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city lights as if they were the most fascinating stars. "Estás perdida? Are you lost?" Miguel asked, leaving his mop in its bucket. The girl turned, and Miguel felt a strange jolt of recognition. Her eyes, almond-shaped and serious, reminded him of Lucia's. "I'm not lost," she said, her Spanish perfect but strangely accented. "I've been looking for you, Miguel Alvarez." A chill that had nothing to do with the building's aggressive air conditioning crept up Miguel's spine. "Who are you? Where are your parents?" The girl smiled, and it was both innocent and ancient. "My name is Itzel, and I'm here because of what you did. The hospital, your savings." Miguel frowned, moving closer with the caution of someone approaching a wild animal. "How do you know about that? Did Diane tell you?" "No one told me." Itzel turned back to the window, pressing her small palm against the glass. "I've waited a very long time for someone like you. Someone who understands that love doesn't end when loss begins." Before Miguel could respond, the elevator chimed. He turned reflexively, expecting security or perhaps a late-working executive. When he looked back to the window, Itzel was gone. He searched the entire floor, checking conference rooms and even the women's restroom after knocking loudly. Nothing. The security log showed no child entering the building that day. That night, Miguel dreamed of home. Not the cramped apartment where he now lived, but the small house of his childhood, where chickens scratched in the yard and his mother's voice called him in for dinner. In the dream, Itzel sat at the table, breaking bread with his long-dead family, belonging there as naturally as if she'd always had a place. He woke with tears on his face and a strange sense of anticipation. Professor Elena Cortez couldn't explain her sudden impulse to visit Mercy Children's Hospital. Academic curiosity, she told herself as she requested a meeting with the hospital administration. The story of the immigrant janitor's donation had touched something in her, something that went beyond scholarly interest. "It was quite extraordinary," said Marion Wells, the hospital's development director, a woman with efficient movements and compassionate eyes. "Mr. Alvarez's donation came exactly when we needed it. Our pediatric oncology program had a funding gap that was threatening a promising research initiative." Elena leaned forward. "So his money went specifically to cancer research?" "Yes." He was quite insistent. Marion tilted her head, curiosity crossing her features. "May I ask why a professor of pre-Columbian studies is interested in a recent donation?" Elena hesitated, aware of how academic reputations could shatter under the weight of mysticism. "I believe there may be a cultural significance to Mr. Alvarez's actions, something that resonates with texts I'm studying." "Well, whatever your interest, perhaps you'd like to attend our donor appreciation event next month. Mr. Alvarez will be there, though he was reluctant to be recognized." Elena's heart stuttered in her chest. Yes, I would." Miguel began seeing Itzel everywhere. She would appear briefly in crowds, watching him with those ancient eyes before vanishing when he tried to approach. Once, she sat on a bench outside his apartment building, feeding pigeons with breadcrumbs that seemed to materialize from empty hands. "Who are you?" he demanded on the fifth such encounter, having chased her 3 blocks only to find her waiting calmly in a small park. "I told you, I'm Itzel." She patted the space beside her on the bench. Miguel sat, his breath coming hard. At 63, he was too old for chasing ghosts. "You are not a normal child," he said, stating the obvious. "No," she smiled. "Just as your donation was not a normal gift. It was nothing special. Just an old man with no need for money anymore." Itzel's expression softened with something like pity. "Is that what you believe? That you have no purpose now that Lucia is gone?" The mention of his daughter's name froze the breath in Miguel's lungs. "How do you know about her?" "I know many things, Miguel Alvarez. I know you came to this country to escape violence, not poverty. I know you worked 3 jobs until your hands were raw when Lucia needed special doctors. I know you still talk to her photograph every night." She looked down at her small hands. "And I know what it's like to wait centuries for someone who remembers that giving is the oldest form of prayer." A strange calm settled over Miguel, replacing his initial fear. Whatever Itzel was, hallucination, angel, or something his Catholic upbringing had no name for, she spoke with a truth he felt in his bones. "Why me?" he asked simply. "Because you gave without expectation of return." Because your heart remained open after it was broken. She reached out, touching his weathered hand with her small one. The prophecy speaks of a guardian who will return when such a gift is given. I am that guardian, Miguel. And now that you have awakened me, there is much to be done. What prophecy? What must be done? Miguel's head swam with confusion. You'll understand soon. Just promise you'll attend the hospital event. It's important. Before he could question her further, Itzel was gone again, leaving only the lingering warmth of her hand on his. That evening, Miguel received a formal invitation from Mercy Children's Hospital. The coincidence, if it was one, left him trembling. The donor appreciation event was held in the hospital's atrium, a soaring space filled with natural light even as evening approached. Miguel felt profoundly out of place in his one good suit, surrounded by wealthy benefactors in designer clothes. He had almost decided not to come, but Itzel's request, or instruction, had felt important in ways he couldn't articulate. Mr. Alvarez. Marion Wells approached, genuine warmth in her smile. We're so honored you could join us. She guided him through the crowd, introducing him to doctors and other donors. Many seemed surprised to meet him, their eyes widening slightly at his work-roughened hands and accented English. But their respect seemed genuine, especially among the medical staff. Your donation came at a pivotal moment, explained Dr. Harrington, head of oncology. We were weeks away from having to abandon a promising treatment protocol. The preliminary results are, well, they're remarkable. Miguel nodded politely, understanding the general sentiment if not the medical terminology that followed. His attention drifted, scanning the crowd for a small figure in a blue uniform. Instead, his eyes met those of a woman perhaps in her 40s, with intelligent eyes and a sudden, startled expression of recognition. Miguel Alvarez? She asked, approaching with an intensity that made him step back slightly. I'm Professor Elena Cortez. I've been hoping to meet you. The name triggered something. Hadn't he seen it recently? Then he remembered. The newspaper. She had been quoted briefly in the article about his donation, though he couldn't recall why an academic had commented on a simple charitable gift. You're the historian, he said. Archaeologist and linguist, technically. Her smile was nervous, her hands clutching her glass too tightly. Mr. Alvarez, this may sound strange, but have you noticed anything unusual since your donation? Any unexpected encounters? Miguel's heart skipped a beat. Why do you ask this? Before Elena could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A young couple burst in, the woman cradling a small boy who couldn't have been more than 5. The child's face was pale, his body limp. Help! Please, he just collapsed, the father shouted, panic making his voice crack. Medical staff rushed forward, professional calm overlaying urgency. Doctor? Harrington took charge, guiding the family toward the emergency doors. As they passed Miguel, the boy's eyes fluttered open briefly, meeting Miguel's gaze. And there, in the depths of the child's eyes, Miguel saw Itzel looking back at him. It's starting, Elena whispered beside him, her face drained of color. What is? Miguel asked, unable to look away as the medical team disappeared through the doors with the child. The prophecy. When the cycle of sorrow is broken, the guardian will heal the broken vessels. Elena's voice shook. Mr. Alvarez, I believe your donation has set something in motion. Something that's been waiting for centuries. As if summoned by her words, the lights in the atrium flickered, then steadied. A hush fell over the crowd, the kind of silence that feels heavy with anticipation. And then Itzel appeared, not the child in the school uniform, but a presence that filled the room, invisible to all except Miguel, and, he realized with shock, Elena. The girl's form seemed to shimmer at the edges, as if barely contained by the reality around her. The first healing begins. Itzel's voice resonated in Miguel's mind. But there will be more. You must both help me. Elena gasped softly, confirming she heard it too. You see her? Miguel asked. Not clearly, but I feel her. I hear her. Elena's academic composure cracked, revealing wonder and fear in equal measure. The codex mentioned a guardian who would return to heal. I thought it was metaphorical. All these years studying ancient texts, and I never truly believed. Belief is not required. Itzel's voice came again. Only action. The time of restoration has begun. The doors to the emergency area burst open, and Dr. Harrington emerged, his face transformed with bewilderment and joy. He's fine, he announced to the anxious parents who had remained in the atrium. Completely fine. The brain hemorrhage we detected on initial scan, it's gone. As if it never existed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Medical miracles happened, of course, but the speed, the completeness, it defied explanation. Miguel felt a tug inside his chest, as if invisible strings connected him to the recovered child, to Itzel, to something vast and ancient that was only now awakening. Beside him, Elena clutched his arm, her academic skepticism battling with the evidence before her eyes. "We should talk," she said quietly. "Somewhere private." They found an empty consultation room down a quiet hallway. Elena paced while Miguel sat, his legs suddenly too weak to hold him. "The Codex Vaticinium," she began, scholar's instinct taking over despite her agitation, "is a collection of prophecies from a civilization that predates both Aztec and Maya cultures. Most academics consider it metaphorical, but it describes with disturbing accuracy a series of events including a foreigner who cleans the temples of wealth, making a sacrifice that would awaken the sleeping guardian." Miguel's mind reeled. "And you think this is about me? A janitor who gave some money? Not just any money, your life savings. Given to help children with the same disease that took your daughter?" Elena stopped pacing, facing him directly. "The specificity is unnerving. And now this child's mysterious recovery. Itzel said there would be more healings," Miguel said, the reality of their situation settling into his bones. "She said we must help her." "Yes, but how?" "The Codex doesn't—" Elena broke off as the lights flickered again. This time, Itzel appeared fully materialized between them, her school uniform replaced by clothing that seemed woven from light itself. "The Guardian requires anchors in this world," she said, her voice now audible in the air rather than just their minds. "A giver who acts from pure love, a witness who understands the old ways. Together, you will help me fulfill what was promised centuries ago." "Which is what exactly?" Elena asked, her academic curiosity overpowering her fear. "Healing. Restoration." Itzel's form shimmered. "Long ago, my people faced a great sickness that threatened to destroy everything. Our wisest healers sacrificed themselves to create me, a guardian who could return when the world was ready, when someone demonstrated that the sickness of the heart could be overcome." "Sickness of the heart?" Miguel asked. "Greed, fear, the belief that one must hoard rather than give, hate rather than love." Itzel's ancient eyes held centuries of patient waiting. "Your act, Miguel Alvarez, proved that even after great loss, love can prevail. It created a doorway through which I could return." "And now what?" Elena asked. "You'll heal sick children?" "Not just children. Not just physical ailments." Itzel moved closer, her presence warming the room. "The prophecy speaks of 3 days of healing. Body, mind, spirit. What you witnessed tonight is only the beginning." Miguel thought of his years of isolation, of grief, of feeling adrift in a country that often seemed to look through him rather than at him. "Why us? Surely there are more important people who could help you." Itzel's smile held the wisdom of ages. "Importance is not measured in wealth or power, Miguel Alvarez. It is measured in the capacity to love beyond reason, to give without calculation. Few achieve what you have." The responsibility settled over him like a mantle, heavy yet somehow right, as if he'd been preparing for this moment his entire life without knowing it. "What must we do?" he asked simply. "Tomorrow brings the second healing," Itzel said. "Be ready." With that, she vanished, leaving Miguel and Elena staring at each other in the sudden emptiness of the consultation room. "This is impossible," Elena whispered, scientific training warring with what she had witnessed. "Many things seemed impossible to me," Miguel replied, a lifetime of hardship and wonder in his voice. "Coming to this country, building a life here, losing Lucia and continuing to live." He stood, straightening his shoulders. "And yet, here we are." Elena studied him, seeing now what Itzel must have seen. Not just an aging janitor, but a man whose capacity for love had literally changed the rules of reality. "I'll pick you up tomorrow morning," she said finally. "It seems we have work to do." The night passed fitfully for Miguel, his dreams filled with visions of his homeland, of Lucia, of civilizations rising and falling like waves on a distant shore. He woke feeling changed in ways he couldn't articulate, as if his donation had been only the first step in a transformation that was still unfolding. Elena arrived at 7, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she had slept no better. "Any sign of our guardian?" she asked as Miguel settled into her car. "No. But I feel her, like a humming beneath my skin." He looked out at the city, seeing it with new eyes. "How many people are suffering right now, do you think? In this city alone?" Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Too many." They drove in silence, neither knowing their destination until Miguel suddenly pointed. "There. We need to go there." "The Veterans Hospital?" Elena frowned but turned where indicated. The Veterans Affairs Medical Center loomed ahead, a sprawling complex where those who had served their country sought healing for wounds both visible and hidden. They parked and entered the main lobby, moving with purpose despite having no plan. In the waiting area, a young woman in military fatigues sat alone, her posture painfully rigid, her gaze fixed on something no one else could see. Without hesitation, Miguel sat beside her. "Good morning," he said gently. The woman, her name tag read Martinez, flinched slightly but managed a tight nod. "You are waiting for someone?" Miguel asked. "Mental health appointment." Her voice was flat, devoid of inflection. "PTSD evaluation. Third one this month." Miguel nodded, feeling Itzel's presence growing stronger. It is hard to explain to others what cannot be seen. Something in his tone made Martinez look at him directly. "You military?" "No. But I have known war. In El Salvador." Miguel rarely spoke of those years, of the violence that had eventually driven him north. Some wounds they never show on the skin. Martinez's rigid posture softened infinitesimally. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Been back 8 months. Her hands, young but somehow ancient with experience, twisted in her lap. "Can't sleep. Can't connect with my family. Keep seeing." She trailed off. "The faces," Miguel finished quietly. "The ones you couldn't save?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Yeah." Elena watched this exchange from a few seats away, holding her breath as she felt the air around them change, becoming heavier, charged with potential. "I believed my heart died with my daughter," Miguel said, his voice steady and true. 5 years I moved through life like a ghost, working, sleeping, existing but not living." He turned fully toward Martinez. "May I show you something?" Curiosity briefly overcame caution in the soldier's eyes. She nodded. Miguel reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, worn photograph, Lucia at 20, before the cancer had taken hold. "My daughter," he said. "When she died, I thought the pain would kill me too. But recently I have discovered something important." He took a deep breath. "Our capacity to love, it never diminishes. Even when those we love are gone, the love remains, waiting to be given again." As he spoke, Itzel appeared beside them, visible only to Miguel and Elena. She placed one luminous hand on Martinez's shoulder. "The mind can be a prison," Itzel's voice whispered, audible to all 3 now. "But you possess the key." Martinez stiffened, looking around in confusion. "Did you hear that? The voice?" Miguel asked calmly. "Yes, she is here to help you, if you will allow it." In another circumstance, such words might have sent Martinez fleeing, but something in Miguel's steady presence, in the shared understanding of trauma, kept her rooted to her seat. "Whose is she?" Martinez asked, a tremor entering her voice. "Someone who has waited a very long time to heal the wounds that linger after battle," Miguel answered. "Will you accept her help?" Martinez's training demanded skepticism, but her soul, tired beyond measure, reached instinctively toward hope. "What do I have to do?" "Close your eyes," Itzel instructed, her form becoming more visible as Martinez surrendered to the moment. "Remember that you are more than what you've witnessed, more than what you've done." As Martinez closed her eyes, Itzel placed both hands on the soldier's temples. A soft glow emanated from the contact points, spreading until it encompassed Martinez's entire head in a gentle corona of light. "The memories will remain," Itzel said, her voice resonating with power and compassion. "But their grip on you is broken. You are released from their tyranny." The light intensified briefly, causing Elena to shield her eyes. When she looked again, Martinez was sitting alone, Itzel having vanished. But the change was immediate and profound. The rigid tension had melted from the soldier's body. Her breathing had deepened. And when she opened her eyes, the haunted distance had been replaced by something like peace. "What just happened?" she asked, looking around in confusion. "Something that the Codex calls the healing of fractured minds," Elena said, moving closer. "How do you feel?" Martinez pressed a hand to her chest, wonder spreading across her features. "Like someone untied a knot that's been choking me for years." She looked at Miguel, then Elena. "Who are you people?" "Just messengers," Miguel said with a small smile. "The Guardian did the real work." "Guardian?" Martinez looked around again. "I thought I heard. Felt ... Something? Someone." She shook her head. "I should be freaking out right now, but I feel calm, clearer than I have since before my first deployment." As they spoke, a doctor approached, clipboard in hand. Sergeant Martinez? We're ready for you. Martinez stood, a fluid movement free from the tension that had gripped her moments before. I think I'm going to pass on the evaluation today, Doc. Her voice held a confidence that had been absent earlier. Actually, I feel like I might be ready to try that group therapy you've been recommending. The doctor's surprise was evident, but he nodded. That's excellent, Sergeant. We have a session starting in 20 minutes if you'd like to join. After Martinez had gone, Elena turned to Miguel, her academic mind struggling to categorize what they had witnessed. The second healing? She said. The mind. Miguel nodded, feeling both drained and energized. Tomorrow will be the last, the healing of the spirit. But what does that mean? And how will we know where to go? Miguel looked around the hospital waiting room at the faces marked by varying degrees of suffering and hope. I think Itzel will guide us, as she did today. As they left the VA hospital, neither noticed the newspaper that had been left on Martinez's vacated seat, folded open to a small article about the unexpected donation of an immigrant janitor to Mercy Children's Hospital. That night, as Miguel prepared for bed, he found himself talking to Lucia's photograph as he always did, but with a different heart than before. Something is happening, mi vida, he told her, polishing the glass over her smiling face. Something that makes me think perhaps your death, my grief, it wasn't the end of our story. For the first time in 5 years, the ache of her absence felt different. Not gone, but transformed, as if her love continued through his actions, through whatever this strange mission with Itzel might accomplish. He slept deeply and woke to the sound of his phone ringing. Elena's voice was urgent. Turn on your television. Channel 7. Miguel fumbled for the remote, clicking to the local news. A reporter stood outside Mercy Children's Hospital, her expression one of controlled excitement. Doctors are calling it unprecedented. 6 patients in the pediatric oncology ward have shown complete remission overnight, their cancers simply gone without explanation. Among them is 5-year-old Mateo Ruiz, who was admitted 2 days ago with what doctors called an inoperable brain hemorrhage. The camera cut to the same boy Miguel had seen at the donor event, now playing energetically in the hospital playroom, all signs of illness erased. This follows reports from the Veterans Affairs Medical Center of multiple patients experiencing sudden relief from post-traumatic stress symptoms. The reporter continued. Miguel's phone beeped with an incoming text. Unknown sender. The final healing approaches. Meet me at the place where wealth and poverty touch. He knew immediately where to go. Elena picked him up within the hour. They drove downtown in tense silence, the weight of what they had witnessed, what they had somehow facilitated, pressing down on them. The Codex mentioned 3 healings, Elena said finally. Body, mind, and now spirit. But what does that mean exactly? Religious conversion? Moral awakening? Miguel stared out at the city passing by. I think it means hope. The restoration of belief that goodness matters. They arrived at Westbrook Financial Tower, the gleaming skyscraper where Miguel had spent decades cleaning floors and emptying trash cans, invisible to most who worked there. Across the street, a homeless encampment had grown in recent months, blue tarps and cardboard shelters creating a stark contrast to the tower's opulence. Here, Miguel said, where wealth and poverty touch. They parked and crossed to the encampment. No one questioned their presence or purpose, a strange quiet having fallen over the normally bustling area. Even the traffic seemed muted, as if the city itself were holding its breath. In the center of the encampment, they found Itzel waiting, no longer appearing as a young girl, but as a luminous presence that seemed to shift between forms. Child, woman, ancient crone, all and none of these. You have come faithfully, she said, her voice carrying to them alone despite the open air. The final healing can now begin. What will happen? Elena asked, academic caution warring with wonder. The sickness of the spirit is the deepest wound, Itzel answered. It is the belief that we are separate from one another, that the suffering of others is not our concern. It is the root of all other pain. As she spoke, people began to gather, drawn by something they could not see but clearly felt. Office workers from the tower, the homeless from the encampment, passers-by who had no reason to stop but found themselves unable to move on. Miguel Alvarez, Itzel said, her form growing brighter. You gave without expectation of return. You loved beyond loss. Now I ask you to give once more. Your voice, your story. Miguel looked at the gathering crowd in alarm. I am not a speaker. I have no words of wisdom. You have lived wisdom, Itzel countered. That is worth more than clever phrases. Before he could protest further, Miguel found himself standing before the assembled crowd, their faces turned toward him expectantly. Among them, he recognized faces from the tower, executives who had walked past him for years without seeing him, janitors he had worked alongside, security guards, administrative staff. And among the homeless, people whose faces he had come to know from his early morning shifts, when he would sometimes share his lunch with those who looked hungriest. Itzel stood behind him, invisible to all except him and Elena, her light growing steadily brighter. "My name is Miguel Alvarez," he began tentatively. "Most of you do not know me. I have cleaned the floors of that building for 22 years. He gestured toward the tower. "I came to this country running from violence, hoping to build a safe life for my daughter." Something in his simple honesty held the crowd's attention. No one moved. No phones came out to record the strange gathering. "When cancer took my daughter 5 years ago, I thought my purpose was gone. The money I saved for her future sat in a bank, useless to me. So recently I gave it away, to the hospital that had tried to save her." A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone from the tower recognized him from the newspaper article. "What I did not know," Miguel continued, his voice growing stronger, "is that this small act would become something larger. That it would remind me that even in grief, we have something to give. That no one is so poor they cannot help another, and no one is so rich they need nothing." As he spoke, Itzel's light began to extend outward, touching first Miguel, then Elena, then spreading in gentle waves through the crowd. Not visible light, but something felt rather than seen, a warming of the heart, a softening of the barriers between self and other. "I was invisible to most of you," Miguel said, looking directly at the tower employees now. "Just as many of you are invisible to each other. Just as these people," he gestured to the homeless individuals, "are invisible to those who pass by. But we are all connected. The ancient ones knew this. When one suffers, all suffer. When one gives, all receive." The light from Itzel had now encompassed the entire gathering, creating a sphere of shared awareness that transcended ordinary perception. People began to look at each other differently, really seeing one another perhaps for the first time. "I am just a janitor who gave what he no longer needed," Miguel said, his voice breaking slightly. "But maybe that is enough. Maybe we all have something to give that another needs. Maybe that is how the world heals, one act of love at a time." As he finished speaking, Itzel's light intensified to a brilliant flash that seemed to pierce through every person present. For a brief, transcendent moment, each person felt their connection to all others, not as an intellectual concept, but as a lived reality. The barriers between them, built of fear and indifference, dissolved, and then the light receded, drawing back into Itzel's form. But something had changed. The silence that followed Miguel's words was not empty but full, charged with recognition and possibility. A young executive stepped forward, removing his expensive coat. Without a word, he placed it around the shoulders of an elderly homeless woman. A barista from the tower's coffee shop began distributing the pastries she had been bringing to work. A homeless man offered to help a wheelchair-bound office worker whose wheel had caught on the uneven pavement. Small acts, perhaps insignificant in isolation, but they spread, multiplied, one gesture of kindness inspiring another. The invisible lines that had divided these groups, social status, wealth, circumstance, hadn't vanished entirely, but had become permeable, allowing connection where before there had been only separation. Miguel watched in wonder as Itzel's form began to fade, her mission complete. "Is this the end?" he asked quietly. "You're leaving?" "The Guardian's work is finished for now," she said, her voice already distant. "But what has been awakened will continue. Those who have felt connection cannot easily forget it." "Will we see you again?" Elena asked, the scholar in her still hungry for understanding. Itzel's smile held the wisdom of centuries. "I am never far from those who give freely. The prophecy is fulfilled, but its effects are just beginning." With that she was gone, not dramatically, but like a candle whose light is no longer needed in the dawn. Miguel and Elena stood watching as the spontaneous acts of kindness continued around them, connecting people who, moments before, had been strangers. "The healing of the spirit," Elena murmured. "Not religious conversion, but the restoration of connection," Miguel finished. "The remembering that we belong to each other." In the days that followed, strange reports continued to emerge. Inexplicable healings at hospitals across the city, veterans finding sudden relief from trauma symptoms, and perhaps most puzzling to social scientists, a measurable increase in charitable giving and community involvement centered around but not limited to the downtown area where Miguel had spoken. The media attempted to find explanations, everything from mass hysteria to religious revival to contaminants in the water supply. Experts appeared on television to offer theories that grew increasingly elaborate as the phenomenon continued. Elena was approached by colleagues curious about her sudden interest in contemporary social movements rather than ancient civilizations. She spoke carefully, sharing her observations while omitting the role she and Miguel had played. Her academic reputation remained intact, though she found herself less concerned with it than before. Miguel returned to his janitorial duties, but with a profound difference. People in the tower now greeted him by name. Executives stopped to ask about his day. A community fund was established to improve conditions in the homeless encampment, with many tower employees volunteering their time. Small changes, perhaps. But as ripples from a single stone can eventually reach distant shores, the effects of those 3 days of healing continued to spread in ways both seen and unseen. 1 month after Itzel's disappearance, Miguel received a letter from Mercy Children's Hospital. The experimental treatment that his donation had helped fund had shown unprecedented success rates. It was being fast-tracked for wider trials, with the potential to save thousands of children with conditions similar to Lucia's. He sat in his small apartment, the letter trembling in his hands, and felt Lucia's presence stronger than it had been since her death. Not as a ghost or vision, but as a continuing force of love working through him. "We did it, mi vida," he whispered to her photograph. "Your life continues to matter." That evening, Miguel met Elena at a small cafe halfway between the university and his apartment. They had stayed in contact, drawn together by their shared experience and the responsibility of bearing witness. "I've been translating more of the Codex," Elena said after they had ordered. "There are passages that seem to describe what happens after the 3 healings, a period of renewal spreading like dawn across troubled waters." Miguel nodded, unsurprised. "I feel it. Not just in the obvious ways, but in how people look at each other now. Something has shifted." "The prophecy wasn't just about healing individual suffering," Elena said, her academic precision giving way to wonder. "It was about remembering what we're capable of, our capacity for connection, for compassion, for love," Miguel added simply. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 unlikely allies brought together by ancient wisdom and modern miracles. Outside the cafe window, the city continued its rhythm, but with subtle differences. People helping strangers upstairs, commuters making space for others on crowded sidewalks. Small kindnesses that might have always existed but now seemed more frequent, more intentional. "What will you do now?" Elena asked eventually. Miguel considered the question. His life had been defined by work, by grief, by survival for so long. Now, unexpectedly, he faced possibility. "I will keep cleaning floors," he said with a small smile. "But I will also look for chances to give what I can. Maybe start a small fund for immigrants who need help with medical bills." He looked down at his weathered hands. "And I will remember that no act of love is ever wasted, even when we cannot see where it leads." As they parted ways that evening, neither Miguel nor Elena could have predicted all the ways their lives would continue to intersect, or how the ripples from those 3 remarkable days would eventually touch shores far beyond their city. But they carried with them the certainty that sometimes the smallest actions, a donation, a moment of true seeing, a story shared, could fulfill prophecies older than memory. And somewhere, in a realm beyond ordinary sight, Itzel watched and waited for the next moment when love would create a doorway between worlds. An immigrant janitor had donated his savings to charity, unaware it fulfilled an ancient prophecy. But perhaps the greatest prophecy was the one written in the human heart, the enduring belief that compassion could heal what had been broken, and that no one who gives from love is ever truly poor.